to fight on the landing ground.
Thank you for joining us. You're listening to A Radio, and this is the Morning Minute. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. I want to tell you a short story about someone I think should never have been put in jail, and I urge you all to look this up. I will put links on my website, but look it up yourself. But what I want to get over in this short piece is that the people our soldiers are fighting are barbarians. Nothing more, nothing less. And we play nice. We play stupid, ridiculous political games back here where we are supposedly safe and sound, while these heroes are stuck in some rat-infested hole somewhere supposedly fighting to keep us safe. And we are more concerned about playing the Marquis of Queensberry rules than winning. Isn't it all about winning and keeping us safe? Anyway, the gentleman concerned, his name is Sergeant Alexander Blackman. This name came to me recently, actually by my father-in-law. The case for and against Royal Marine who murdered a wounded unarmed Taliban fighter. That's the title. In late May, J Company took its first casualties. They hit Blackman's troop hard in a single bomb blast. His protege, Lieutenant Augustine, and Marine Sam Alexander, 28, who had won a military cross on previous tour, were killed. Others were maimed. Horror followed horror. The Taliban displayed in a tree Royal Marine body parts torn off by another explosive blast to taunt and demoralize the survivors. That's what I'm saying. They're not human beings, they're barbarians. The kind of medieval barbarity that would surely be enough to test any man's state of mind. That's my point. On another occasion, Blackman and his men had to hunt a missing soldier who was subsequently found, horribly tortured, executed, and dumped in a watercourse. Who does that? Not a human being, my friends, not a human being. They are not fighting an ordinary war. Now, that, I think, could be classed as post-traumatic stress. It's hard to imagine the daily pressures faced by Blackman and the 15 men in his command as they perform their duties at a command post called Omar, a remote compound at the very front line of the UK's efforts to wrest back Helmand province, I'm assuming that is, from the tyranny of the Taliban. And that's typical of the British, is typical of the Canadians and all the Western countries. 15 men. Think about that. Undermanned and overstretched, the Marines lived there for 6 months in a cramped mud brick enclosure, patrolling for up to 10 hours a day and living with a constant threat of buried IEDs and bomb attack. 7 Marines from 42 Commando were killed during this tour, and after one IED explosion, soldiers from the unit found body parts of British troops deliberately hung from a tree to taunt them. Now the case on Sergeant Alexander Blackman is this, that on September 15, 2011, Blackman pointed his 9mm pistol at the chest of a wounded Taliban fighter and pulled the trigger with the words, "Shuffle off this mortal coil, you blank. It's nothing you wouldn't do to us." Unbeknown to the Royal Marine, his actions were being recorded on a helmet-mounted camera of a comrade. In 2013, he was convicted by a court-martial of murdering an unarmed insurgent. And there is the problem, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? There is the problem. The first such conviction of a serving British soldier since the Second World War. That this hugely experienced serviceman's actions resulted in the killing of a prisoner is uncontested, but thereafter opinions about the nature of his crime, for which he is serving a minimum of 8 years imprisonment, diverge sharply. To his supporters, Blackman is a political scapegoat whose lapse in judgment under the pressure that anyone would have gone into. The steeliest warrior is being used to cover up the failings of Britain's top brass in Afghanistan. A psychiatric report on Blackman presented only after his conviction found that he and his men had been under near intolerable stress. At sentencing, the court-martial conceded it was likely the Marine had been suffering to some degree from combat stress disorder. You don't say. Campaigners are even now trying to free this gentleman. They argue that this finding and other evidence being put into the court-martial would have been given a different result. He was found guilty of manslaughter, and it looks like he's serving around 3 years imprisonment at the moment, but could be freed shortly. But that's not the point, is it? These soldiers are under intolerable conditions, placed by the military of defence in Britain and the Canadian defence in Canada to fight with ridiculous numbers of troops, all to keep the military numbers down, because they don't want a proper military in Canada, in Britain, and in Europe. They don't want to face the fact that if you're going to fight these barbarians, you've got to match their numbers, treble them, quadruple them, overwhelm them, and crush them. You can't fight with the Marquis of Queensberry rules. You've got to kill them. It's kill or be killed, or we go home and wait for them to come to our doorstep. You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com. I am very pleased to announce that thanks to you for following us on Spreaker.com, that A Radio can now be found on iTunes under A Radio. Thank you, everyone. And I'm on Twitter at A Radio Canada. I'm also on Facebook at A Radio Canada. I am on Gab at A Radio. You can email me at aradiocanada@gmail.com. Please click the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all my morning minutes at Spreaker.com under A Radio. That's EHRADIO, A Radio. And please click on the like button. And you can also find all my podcasts and morning minutes at aradio.wordpress.com. And click on the Morning Minutes tab.